Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Flower Power Live. Now, as an herbalist, or most herbalists, they're often asked, what are your top 10 most important plants that you like? And while that is just pretty much impossible just to name 10 plants, this plant of the week is something that I would very likely put on my list of top 10 plants because it is so versatile and has so many different important uses. Willow is our plant. So, hello, I'm Allison from the Well Cultivated Life. And thank you so much for joining me here for Flower Power Live so we can share together in this cool plant knowledge. Now, I'm going to start right out by admitting that I have a special place in my heart for willow because when the house I grew up in had a huge willow tree out in the yard with a swing, and we built a tree for it. And I spent a lot of days, have a lot of memories, good memories from either in or under that tree. Now, this tree was the um, hold on. Let me get my picture here for you. Was this one here on the right. It was the Salix babylonica or weeping willow, which is one that we are all quite familiar with. It's what we kind of think of as the iconic willow tree. And it is originally from China, but it has been planted all around the globe. In northern hemisphere is really where these willows thrive. And it's because it's so beautiful. Now, the plant on the left is another type of willow. It's more like a small shrub. Sometimes they're called osiers. And they're all part of a family called the Salicaceae family. And that also includes poplars and aspen. And cottonwood is one of the ones that's in that group. And so one of the other trees that is used a lot is this one here. It's called white willow. And as we'll find out later in the show, it has some medicinal properties, and the white willow is what's most often used for the medicinal willow. But one of the cool things about willow is this tree here, black willow, also known as the pussy willow. And now that I think of it, we actually had one of these trees in our yard as well. And I remember my mom always cutting the pussy willows early in the spring and bringing them inside for us to enjoy the fuzzy little catkins, not catkins, but the bud covers there. Now on the left, you'll see the catkins of the willow, and these are the flowers, and they're different from what we usually think of as a flower. And that's because they don't have any kind of petals or sepals, and because they're wind pollinated, they don't need to attract any kind of insect over to pollinate them. And the other thing that's unique about trees in this family is that they are dioecious, which means the tree is either a male tree or a female tree, so you're going to have different types of flowers on the plants. Now, one of willows are found mostly growing in wet kind of areas. And this is very good for your landscape. If you have a boggy area that you want to dry up, you can plant willows there. And again, you don't have to get a huge willow tree. You can get one of these smaller shrubs, and they're found in nature in like riparian zones and near lakes and rivers and that sort of thing. And so because of this characteristic, and because they like these kinds of areas, they can be used a lot in sort of restoration projects in some place that might have been damaged, and they can be brought in there and to help kind of repair the area. They make a great windbreak, and so they are really a great plant for lots of different uses in the landscape. Now, willows have been having a relationship with people for many, many thousands of years. They were included in the plant lore of the Victorian flower language and were used to represent like mourning or grief and often brought to funerals. They're also, now last week we talked a little bit about um, the transition. We're halfway towards spring. And it turns out that willow, and one of the reasons why I wanted to do willow right now was that willow is associated with the Celtic cross quarter celebration of Imbolc, which we didn't really have time to talk about very much. But I found this lovely blog called Goddess and Green Man, which has a lot of really good information about the Celtic festivals. And this is what they say about willow. Willow is the great shapeshifter of consciousness and emotion and symbolizes feminine energy and the lunar cycle. Its branches are flexible, expressing movement and change rather than resistance. So it also has different magical associations with different goddesses, Hecate, Lilith, Persephone, and others, and is said to be the best wand to use for a woman's wand if you're into some of those magical things. Now, willow was also a very important plant for used by Native Americans, and one of the main things that it was used for was for making these amazing baskets. Now, baskets used to be one of the most important um, containers. They were used for all different kinds of things. And when other types of materials came around later in like the late 1800s, early 1900s, they kind of stopped being used for practical use and really became much more ornamental. But if you have ever tried to weave a basket, I took a basket weaving class one time, and I was blown away at how difficult it was. And when I look at these beautiful, artistic, amazing baskets, you know that it's a skill and a talent that is passed down. It's an artistry that's passed down. And this is how people learned. They were passed down from generation to generation. It was usually the women that were the basket weavers. Now, not only baskets, but all kinds of things that willow could be used for because it's so flexible. So one of these other examples here are these sort of backrests that could be made, and there's sort of a tripod of I don't know if you can see it in this picture, but there's sort of this tripod of sticks that would go into the ground, and then the backrest would kind of hang off of that, and you could use that for sitting around in a circle. And of course, the wood of willow has all kinds of uses because it's flexible and strong. It was used for arrows. You could make hats out of it. I mean, there was all kinds of things that it was able to be used for. And of course, not only was willow used for those sorts of things, but also willow is a really important medicine. And the main constituents is called salicin and other salicylates, which are these compounds that inspired the making of aspirin. So in the 1800s, the plants were taken and kind of refined, and the chemical constituent was identified. And so that became the basis for aspirin. Now, you've probably taken aspirin, but the willow bark is the part of the plant that's used for the medicine. And of course, this is good for fevers and inflammation. And this has been used for thousands of years, like way before written history. One thing I saw said that Hippocrates would, give this out to people, and you would just chew on the bark of the plant, and it's the inner bark, the inside. You would scrape out the outer part, and it's the inside of the bark that is where the compounds are. Now they can help you with a headache, we kind of know what aspirin helps with, but according to Jeannie Rose, it has all kinds of uses, including as an anodyne, which means painkiller, antipyretic, which is fever reducing. It's an astringent, a tonic, and an antiseptic, and so you could take it internally for arthritis, or you could use it as a skin wash for acne or any kind of like skin infections and that sort of thing as well. Now, David Hoffman says that the black willow, which is the pussy willow, is specifically used for this rheumatoid arthritis. That's what he recommends it for. Now, all willows contain a certain amount of salicin, and I have one out in my yard, but I was going to do a cutting, but it's so icy here right now. I thought if I go out, I may not come back, and you'd all be sitting here waiting for the program to start. So I decided to just show you some pictures. But you can harvest any kind of twigs, and you, like I said, you just scrape off the outer bark, and you peel off the inner bark from the heartwood. Now, the heartwood is the part that's like woody on the very center. And why not? Give it a try. You can put it into an alcohol extract or whatever you want to, or just give it chew on the leaf. Now, of course, if you are allergic to aspirin or any kind of aspirin product, you do not want to be using willow. So just bear in mind, as always, that you need to use caution when you're deciding to use herbs and plants for your own health. Now, a thing that's interesting is, I've used willow. I have like kind of a Lyme arthritis. And so I've used willow, and I just ran out of it like 2 days ago. And I woke up this morning with really stiff hands. Is it the willow that's been helping me? I do not know, but I would suffice it to say that it is. And I think I'm going to either make or get some more. Now, the thing that's interesting is that the properties that it treats in the physical body are very similar to what it treats in the sort of mental, emotional body. And I have to say that the willow flower essence, this is maybe why it would make it onto my top 10 list, but it is one of the most important essences that I like to use. And that's because the willow essence is for people who hold on to negative emotions. They're inflexible, they're sort of stuck, and they feel very resentful, like life has, been unfair to me and it's everybody else's fault, and they really cannot let go and accept their life situation. They like to blame others for their misfortune, and let's face it, forgiveness is not their strong suit. So this makes it really hard for people, willow type people, to get older, because as life goes along, things are going to change. And if you're not willing to change, you're inflexible with what comes along in your life, you're just not going to be a happy person. And it can, this relates to the pain that people feel a lot of times when you're holding on to things and you won't let go. So taking the willow essence helps to restore a more positive attitude and kind of like accept your own soul's journey, so to speak, allowing you to forgive and just go with the flow of life a little bit more easily. Now, our oracle card this week is again from the Herbcrafter's Tarot. And the words on the card say, be a wise steward of your resources. Be flexible yet sturdy. Strong roots help young sprouts grow. And the willow is the four of earth, and the fours in this deck represent, sort of boundaries and re-examining those. And so this picture here shows weaving tools and an unfinished willow basket sitting on a wooden table. A sturdy ancient grandmother willow tree stands nearby. Her branches bend in the wind. A harvest of willow rods provides enough material for making many baskets. So you can see here how the rods of the basket are like the frame, and then it's usually woven around with some other type of material. But this card is telling us that, our resources are many and they're plentiful, but we need to steward them properly for long-term sustainability. We should gather only what we need, take care of what we've gathered, and then have respect and give thanks for what we've received. And so this can be more both for physical things that we receive or metaphorically the types of, blessings that we receive in our life. And one of the ways that we can be grateful for this is that if you think about the basket maker, the lineage of the basket maker, it was usually women that were the basket makers. And so they learned from the basket maker before them, and she learned from the basket maker before her. And so this lineage was passed down. And so part of the message is to be appreciative towards those who have taught you the things that you've learned in your life, and those that have brought you different kinds of wisdom. So this year, if you remember, our kind of theme of the year is to re-examine your structures and containers and kind of rules and regulations that you have for yourself, and find out whether you think they're still good or useful or anything worth holding on to, and then revise them if necessary. And so what I love about Willow is loved because it's flexible, right? It's not only flexible, but it's strong. And we often think of structures and borders as sort of rigid. It's going to be strong, and it's going to be, permanent, and it's going to be right here on this line. And I've got a border here and my boundary and all these kinds of things. But what I love is that Willow is adding in this sort of piece of pliability and flexibility. And so this is kind of redefining about what are these boundaries and structures. And one of the things that I really thought what occurred to me is that a structure or a boundary is not useful if all it does is just hold things in place exactly where it was. The boundary has to also be able to open, to let things out, and to receive new things in. So as you're thinking about your way of doing things, are you properly stewarding it? Are you letting things in and out as they need to be? Are you being flexible? And that's something to think about this week. So that's our message from Willow tonight. Thank you so much for joining me here for Flower Power Live. And tell me, what is your favorite part about Flower Power? Just put it down in the comments below. Do you really like getting into the card and the flower essence and the more, even more spiritual or mindset aspects? Or do you find the medicinal and the plant parts of Flower Power more interesting? Let me know in the comments down below. What is your favorite part? So thanks again for joining me. I may or may not be back next week. I'm going to be on vacation, and I don't really know what my schedule is going to be, so I may not be here next week. I will let you know. Thanks so much for joining me, everybody. Bye-bye.